Hello everybody and welcome to a new Oxygen XML webinar. My name is Octavian Nadolu and I will be your host today, and I invited my colleague Alex Gitianu to discuss about custom frameworks in Oxygen. He will show you how you can create a new framework in Oxygen and how you can create actions and have content completion support, validation, or an output for your custom language. But before we start the presentation, let me tell you some useful information. So the webinar will be recorded and the recorded will be available from our events page in the oxygenxml.com website and also on the YouTube channel. You'll get also a follow-up email with these links when the recording will be available, we think in a couple of days. During the webinar, you can ask questions in the questions panel from the GoToWebinar interface. We will answer the questions during the webinar. In case we'll not answer to all the questions, we will send you a follow-up email. Also, you can ask questions on our YouTube channel or our Twitter account, or you can ask questions and mark them with the Oxygen XML hashtag on Twitter. So now I'll give control to Alex to start the presentation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for attending this webinar in which we will talk about how one can extend the support that Oxygen offers by default for any XML vocabulary. So, before we begin, a few words I would like to mention. So, Oxygen offers built-in support for any XML vocabulary and an extended support for some XML documents like DITA or DocBook or TI. What I want to show you in this webinar is that with a little effort, you can have similar kind of support for any XML vocabulary. And for that, I have chosen the Pmode XML vocabulary, which is quite used in the technical documentation area in Germany. So let's see where we begin. I will make a quick comparison between a DITA document and a Pmode document and see the level of support that Oxygen offers for both of them, for each of them. So I'll switch to Oxygen, and this is a DITA framework, a DITA document. This is a text page. We have validation. If I click on the validate button on the toolbar, I get a warning about a key that this definition is not found. I have content completion, so I can insert any element that is valid in the current position. I can switch to author mode and edit this document visually, focusing on the content and hiding the tags. And to publish the document, all I have to do is apply one of the predefined transformation scenarios. And any minute now, we'll see a PDF generated from my DITA topic. Now, sorry. If we take the Pmode document, this one it's a task about how to mount a rotor on a fan. If we try to validate, we get an error that the DTD schema is not found. If we try to insert new elements, the content completion list offers none, which makes sense considering the fact that the DTD wasn't found. If I switch to author mode, I get a warning about no CSS being defined, and because of this missing CSS, the author mode it's not really helpful. It just presents me the text. And if I want to publish the document and I go on the transformation scenario action on the toolbar, you notice that there are no transformation scenario available. So out of the box, I cannot generate any output from this Pmode document. So this is where we begin. We have quite a number of features working for DITA and none for Pmode. So today's agenda would be to, first of all, create a framework configuration for the Pmode document. Next, we will set up validation and content completion. We will create the CSS styling required to visually edit the documents inside Oxygen's author mode. While we're at it, we will also create various actions intended to help the writer be more proficient while working in the author mode. And last but not least, we will also make the publishing work. So somehow we will manage to generate a PDF from our Pmode document. So before we begin, a few words about the framework concept. You've probably heard me mention it a couple of times already. So a framework is basically a configuration like these actions that I've told you about, transformation scenario, bundled together with various resources like CSS files, various schemas, maybe some custom Java code intended to extend the functionality. All these consists in a framework or a document type, like we also called it. So in order to set up validation and content completion, our first goal for today, we will create a framework configuration for Pmode. For that, I will switch to Oxygen and I will copy this public ID here because I will need it in a few seconds. So I will go to Options, Preferences. On the Document Type Association page, this is where we create a new document type or a framework. But before doing that, I'll jump a bit to the location page, because Oxygen by default searches for framework in a default location inside Oxygen's installation directory, in the frameworks directory. But we can also give it additional framework directories. So this is what I'm going to do. First of all, I will switch this page to project options. So what I'm about to change here, it will be bundled in the project, and this setting will be shipped together with a project. And I will add a new frameworks directory. I will use the project directory variable, and I will say that there's another frameworks directory inside my project directory. I will click OK. Now to the document type association page. You'll notice here that we have frameworks for DITA, for DocBook, and many other XML vocabularies. So I will click New, give it a name, it's the Pmode framework, extended support for Pmode documents. And very important, I will choose the storage as external. This means that this configuration will be stored on the local file system, and this way I will be able to ship it to all of my users, all the technical writers that are working with Pmode documents. So I'll choose the location. Yes, here, the frameworks in the Pmode directory. And we also need an association rule. So this is how Oxygen decides which documents belong to a specific framework. We'll create a new association and association rule, and for Pmode we will choose the public ID. So any document that has this public ID in its doc type will be considered a match, and we'll use this configuration that we are about to create. Now if I click OK, here is my new framework, and we return to Oxygen editor, and if I show the properties view, oops, where is the properties view? You will notice that now this document belongs to the Pmode framework. Nothing, the validation doesn't work yet because we didn't actually do anything to fix it, but now we know that this document is matched to the framework that we've just created. To fix the validation, now here in the project view you can see the Pmode directory, and this is actually my framework. All the resources, all the configuration will be stored here in this directory. And I also have here the DTDs needed to validate my Pmode documents. To make Oxygen find these DTDs, I will use a catalog. A catalog is basically a mapping which can map between a public ID, which is what I'm interested in, to the local version of that DTD. So I will copy this catalog inside my framework directory, and afterwards I will return to the framework editing dialog in the catalogs tab, and I will add an entry to that catalog. I will avoid using absolute paths because I want this framework configuration to be shareable and work not only on my machine but on any other machine that where an Oxygen editor is available. And because of that, I will use editor variables. In this particular case, the framework variable. So this will be expanded by Oxygen to the location on the file system where this framework exists. So in the framework directory, there is a catalog.xml like this. And if we validate now, please notice on the bottom here, the validation successful message. Also, if I want to insert a new element, now I get context-sensitive proposals. Like here, I can put a list or a paragraph. If I go somewhere else in the paragraph, I can put an emphasis, inline data, and so on. So we've fixed the validation and the content completion. Moving forward, next on our agenda is the visual editing mode, the author mode. The visual editing in Oxygen is CSS driven, which means that in order to instruct Oxygen how to render an element, you write CSS rules, like this one over here. A CSS rule, a rule set, is composed of a selector, in this case is the name of the element, a paragraph. This selector matches on specific elements. In our case, it will match on paragraph elements from the Pmode vocabulary. Next, inside this rule set, we have a number of declarations, the yellow ones, which are composed from pairs, from property name, property values, pairs. So I can say that a paragraph should be rendered as a block. It should have a margin, and the color blue should be used for when rendering the text from within. So this is what a CSS rule looks like, and CSS is quite easy to understand and to use. But a challenge that arises, especially in the limited time that we have, is that we have quite a few numbers of elements, and like lists and paragraphs and media objects, and each one of them would require quite a few such rule sets and declarations and so on. So it might take longer than we have. What we can do in this situation to speed things up is to use less. Less is CSS with just a little more. So what less brings to the table are some useful features like mixins. A less mixin is sort of like a function. We group a set of properties that characterize, for example, a paragraph. So we can create a paragraph mixin that contains all the properties with all the proper values that I want for rendering paragraphs. And once I have this mixin, whenever I want to render an element like a paragraph, I can just call this mixin. So in the CSS, actually in the less file, I will write the selector. So for a paragraph, use this mixin. So this will be expanded to all these properties. If, for example, I want to render the step element in a similar way, again, all I have to do is write a rule set and just call the paragraph mixin. So this brings an idea of a library constructed from such mixin, then that I can afterwards easily use to create a CSS for my Pmode document. So now I'll go to Oxygen, and as it happens, I've prepared such a library. So here you will notice a mixin for how a title should be rendered, the font size, font family, font weight, and further on a mixin for a paragraph, a mixin for a list, list item, a procedure, and so on. So a few mixin that I've considered to match on the, not only on a Pmode document, but actually on other technical documentation oriented XML vocabulary. For example, you also have a title in DITA. Even in DocBook there is a title. Paragraphs are the same, lists, procedures. So it's something that these vocabularies all have in common. So let's begin creating the rule set for rendering this Pmode document inside the author mode. So first of all, here in the framework directory, in the CSS directory, I will create a new less file. I will call it pmode.less. It's a less file. The first thing I will do, I will import the library less file like this. And now, in order to instruct Oxygen to use it, we'll go to the framework configuration once more. But this time on the author tab, the CSS subtab, we add a new entry. Again, we will use the framework editor variable, and the less file we want to use is located here. Now, unless I've misspelled something in that path, we should be able to switch to author mode and get something like this. So it's not something much better than we originally had, but it's a starting point. I will select the full tags display mode to help me understand what these elements are and decide how we should style them. And let's move the less and the XML side by side, like so. And let's begin constructing our less file. So here we have a heading element, which is kind of like a title. So I will say the selector is heading, and to style it, I will just call the title mixin. If we switch to the XML, you'll notice that right away the heading is being styled differently, like a title should look. Let's add a rule set also for the paragraph. So paragraph should be styled as a paragraph. We have a mixin called paragraph, and the result is improving. Now we have we can distinguish between different paragraphs. After the heading, there is a prerequisites element. I know that DITA, for example, has a similar element. So I've created a mixin for it. Let's see it into action. So a prerequisites element. We invoke the prerequisites mixin. I've put a typo there. And now you should note a label before the prerequisites stating before you begin. This is what you need before you begin this task. Next we have a list with some items in it. Let's style it as a list. Let's see those bullets. So we can say that a list is actually a list. And we have the bullet for the list. Okay, what's next? The task body looks like it's a procedure. It's a sequence of actions followed by a result. Then another sequence of actions followed by a result. So I've created in my library a mixin called procedure. So let's use it, the task body. And actually this mixin could very well be used to style a steps element from DITA. So this is a procedure, and the action element is each action or step from the procedure, and the result is the element that contains what you obtain after following those steps. So this is how I've created my my mixin. So if we take a peek inside the library file, we see that the procedure mixin has this step action child parameter and then the result one. So the XML starts to look better and better. So we can now hide the full tags. I personally prefer working in a mode that hides all these labels. If you're interested in context, you'll always find it on the breadcrumb view here on top of the editor. So you see here that I'm in a result element inside the task body and so on. Right, so here is the procedure, the first step to slide the rear safety grille, and the second one, and then we have the result stating that the rear guard grille is now mounted. We also have some images here. There's an image element, and the image is being referred through an attribute named object name. Okay, let's render these images. So we can say that an image element, which is the child of the media object element, is an image, and the attribute that points to that image is the object name attribute. We return to the author mode, and now we see the images directly in the document as we progress with the task of mounting the rotor. One more thing that I would like to do here is to help the technical writer changing these images. So right now, if I want to point to a different image, I have to use the attributes view on the side and change the value for the object name attribute. So this is a bit disruptive. I would prefer to be able to browse for the image and change it directly from somewhere within the document. And for that, you can use in Oxygen form controls. So we can enhance the author mode with form controls, which can be used to edit attribute values or element values in a specific way. So we can have checkboxes, or we can have a combo box if the user should select a value from a set of predefined values, or even date pickers to help preserve a specific date format. So to use form controls, I've also created a mixin to hide some of the boilerplate code. So now all I have to do is to say that I want your URL chooser for my image, and I need to give it a label. Image URL, let's say, and also it needs the name of the attribute it should change, like so. Now if we return to the author mode, please notice these pencils here. I didn't want these form controls to be too intrusive. You don't really need to change the images that often. So at the beginning, you just see these button form controls, and if you click one, then you will see the URL chooser. So I can browse and select a new image, and afterwards I can hide. So this brings an interesting way of showing more form controls on a request basis. So when you need to edit some attributes, you just enter this editing mode, let's call it, for attributes. But that was not the proper image, so we leave this one on. This is pretty much how I wanted to style this task, but I also have a document with some technical data about my fans. So, and all this information is in a table. So if I switch to author mode, out of the box, it doesn't look like a table, but we'll be able to style it as a table quite easily, because the table model used in Pmode is actually the calls table model. So let's write another rule. Let's say that the T group element is actually a calls table, and afterwards Oxygen will render the table as a table should look like. And I can select cells out of the box and paste them in the table. If I don't have column specification, Oxygen will propose me to add them automatically when I want to resize the columns, and afterwards I will very easily be able to resize my columns. So adding table support was quite easily. Right, so we've styled the author mode. Let's enhance it with a few author actions. So the author actions are just a configuration, like I've previously mentioned, through which you can add all sorts of support. So you've seen, I don't know if you've seen, but for DITA on the toolbar, there were quite a few such author actions, like these ones for inserting lists or table or bold elements and so on. And right now for Pmode, I don't have any. So let's create a couple of such actions. For example, let's create one that inserts a new list item for our list. To do that, I will go to Preferences again and edit the Pmode framework. And this time I will go on the Actions tab. There's a action here on the bottom of the table to create a new action. I'll just give it a li ID and name. The name is not that really important because I will use one of Oxygen's built-in images. If I remember it correctly. Apparently I don't. Maybe there's a dot here. Oh, no, it isn't. Okay, so instead of using an icon, we'll just, well, actually we can have a look at the DITA framework and see, okay, like this. The path to the image we want. So again, we paste here. I wonder what I misspelled. Well, no matter. Okay, so an action is based on some basic operations. Like, for example, an operation is one that inserts a fragment, or another one that changes an attribute. So in our case, we will choose the one that inserts a fragment. And let's not forget the activation XPath. This XPath decides controls actually when an action is enabled and where it is disabled, because it cannot be executed in that context. So if the ancestor or self is an item, for example, if I am in an existing item of the list, then I want to insert this fragment, which is another item with a paragraph in it, because graph, I cannot put text directly inside the item. I need a paragraph. That's how the Pmode vocabulary states. And I want this fragment to be inserted after that ancestor item, so after it. So just a configuration. I've created the action. Now I can put it in the toolbar from the toolbar tab here. So let's put it in the toolbar. We return to the document, and here is the action. If I place myself inside somewhere deep down inside an item, and I click this action here, it inserts a new paragraph. But if I move in a context where a list item cannot be inserted, like inside a heading element, the action is disabled. Let's make this action also work inside an action element from the task body. So let's make it insert another action. To do that, we return to Options. We edit the framework once more. We edit the action, and we will add a new operation context. So let's duplicate the one we've previously created, but now this operation activates when we are somewhere inside an action. When the activation expat ancestor or self action actually returns something. So this time we will put an action element with a step element in it. Also after that ancestor action element. Click OK. So now if I am somewhere inside an action and I click this insert list item, it inserts a new action with a step in it. But again, if I place myself inside the context of an item, it will put an item after it. So it functions differently depending on the context in which I am placed. Let's create another two more actions, this time related to the table. When working with a table, it's quite helpful to have actions that insert a new row and especially a new column. It's quite difficult to manually create the cells for the new column. So having these actions would be a tremendous help for whomever uses Oxygen to edit a Pmode document. Before creating these actions, I need some special operations that we've created for calls table, and these operations can be found inside the DocBook or the DITA framework, because these frameworks also, these XML vocabularies also use the calls table model. So I will copy the DocBook jar file. These operations are actually Java implementation, so I will just copy, but that is something transparent. Just know that I will copy this DocBook jar file inside my framework directory, like so. Next thing, I will go and edit the framework again. But before creating the action, I will go to the class path tab and add a new entry with this jar file that I've just copied, like so. Next, let's create an insert row action. Let's see if I get the icon path right. It's a typo here. That's amazing. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but again, DITA to the rescue. Insert oops, no, not this one. Insert this is the table column. Well, let's take the table column and we will try working with it. So insert row and the name. Right, so we got it, the insert table row icon. And the operation, we should find now an insert row operation, this one, that is created for the calls model. So we selected. Let's check its parameters. The insert location, we don't need it, but the cell fragment is useful. So we will put a paragraph element inside each cell, like so. So this is the insert row action, and we create another one for insert column. This is the icon, and the operation insert, we should find an insert column operation for the calls model, like so. We specify a cell fragment for it as well. And let's put both of them in the toolbar. First of all, let's put a separator, and then insert row and insert column, like so. And let's see them in action. So now, if I am in the table and I press insert row, I get a new row of cells. And if I press insert a new column, then I get a new column. And these actions are also aware of cell spanning. So that's also something quite useful. Right. So I think we've managed to set up the visual editing quite nicely, and yeah, you should have a nice idea about what can be done and how. Let's touch a bit the publishing side as well. So first of all, in Oxygen there is this concept of a transformation scenario, which is actually just a configuration. If you go on the toolbar here, you'll notice this configure transformation scenario action. And like I said, it's just a configuration, because when you publish XML, you actually pass it through a number of pipelines. You apply XSLT or XQuery, or maybe you're using an Ant script that does specific processing before obtaining the final output, like HTML or PDF. So in Oxygen, you can create such configurations. If you have XSLTs that produce HTML, you will create an XML transformation SSLT. And if you have XQuery, there's another type of transformation, and so on. Unfortunately for Pmode, I wasn't able to find some XSLTs so that produce PDFs. And I am also not that skilled with formatting objects, the classic way of generating PDF, so that I can set something up right now. But what we can do is we can generate PDF using Oxygen's PDF chemistry engine, which is an engine that produces PDF based on CSS rules. And lucky for us, we already created such CSS rules for rendering the Pmode document inside the author mode. So we can very easily reuse these CSS rules to generate a PDF. If you want to find out more about chemistry, you can follow this link over here. And there are a lot of resources there. So let's see how we can generate PDF from this document using chemistry. Instead of configuring the transformation scenario from here on the toolbar, I will do it from the framework because I want this configuration to be stored in the framework and be shipped together with the framework. So on the transformation tab, we will create a new transformation scenario. Now, in the next version of Oxygen, which is due to be released in a couple of months, in version 21, things are the setup is really easy. So first of all, I want to show it to you like this. So in version 21, soon to be released, there's a new transformation scenario type, this one, XML to PDF with CSS. And in it, all I have to do is specify the CSS, which is pmode.less file. The output, it's already configured. We can also select this as being the default transformation scenario. And afterwards, we return to the document. Just click the Apply Transformation Scenario. You'll notice from the tooltip that this Pmode scenario that we've just created will be executed. And we get a PDF, which doesn't look bad at all. And it was quite fast to produce. You'll notice that it differs a bit from our author mode. It has these headings here on top. That is because inside my library file, I've hidden here on the bottom a few rule sets that only apply for the print media. So this way I can control when the CSS rules are being used for the author mode or when I'm generating PDF. And you see here that on the top right, I add the text of the heading element. So the chemistry engine is quite powerful, and I invite you to experiment with it. But like I said, this new type of transformation scenario will be available soon. If you want to use chemistry right now inside Oxygen version 20.1, you can still do it. Let me show you how. So I've created an ant build file that runs the chemistry engine, which has command line tools for Windows or Linux. And it has a number of parameters, this script, like the XML being transformed or the CSS to use, where to save it, and catalogs and so on. So having this ant build file, I can create something similar. So again, to the framework, this time I will create an ant transformation. This is Pmode ant scenario. The working directory is Oxygen's installation directory, and the The build file is this build chemistry XML that I've presented. And we need to pass parameters, the parameters that I've presented. So the first one was the path to the chemistry launcher, so it's this one. The next one is the XML URL being transformed, and this is actually the current file. The CSS URL is the one from the framework. The output path, where we want our PDF, is in the current file directory, and it should be the current file name .pdf, and I will copy this. And one more thing, the last one is the catalogs. So this is to for chemistry to reach the DTDs, and this also is in the framework directory catalog.xml. And in the output tab, we will tell Oxygen that this is what it should open when the transformation finishes. Okay, I created this scenario in a hurry. I hope I didn't forget anything. Oops, sorry. So here, let's use this Pmode and scenario. Let's close the PDF and apply it. Chemistry runs in the background, and we get the same PDF. So if you want to start playing with chemistry, you can do that right away quite easily. Okay. So we've seen the publishing part, and with that we've reached the end of this presentation. This is pretty much all that I wanted to present to you in this short time frame. Thank you for bearing with me for almost an hour, and if you have any questions, please ask them if you haven't asked them already, because in this part we will start answering them. So, okay, Octavian, do we have questions?
Yes, we have a lot of questions. Very great presentation. I think I will start to use this language, the PI-Mod language. I think I'll read some of the questions that were asked during the webinar. So one of them was, how can we share the framework with a team? And the answer for this will be that you have different ways to do this. One of them is the one that Alex already presented, adding your framework directly in the project and then share the project with your team. So he configured, as you see in the new additional framework directory, and this was in the project, so you can share it with the project and you'll have all the configuration there. Another solution for this will be to use an add-on that will pack your framework, and then you can distribute with our add-ons support. Maybe we can share some links about this. And another solution is just to copy the framework in the frameworks directory from the Oxygen installation folder. Another question was how does the additional directories pane differs from the custom button from the document type location. Maybe Alex can show us the dialog. So
Yeah.
in the document type, the
This one.
location. Yes. So we have a custom radio. This means that if you select the custom field, this folder will be used instead of the one from the Oxygen installation directory. So all the frameworks that are provided in the built-in Oxygen will not be available. If you use the additional ones, then new frameworks will be added to the ones that already exist in Oxygen. So you can use a custom in case you want to have it have the framework directory in a different location and have some customization made there.
Right. To have full control over which frameworks the user has access to.
Yes, and maybe when you install on new Oxygen, you want to use the same frameworks and you don't want to get the new ones. But
Right.
Another question was about CSS. It says that if I know CSS, then I need to, is any reason to use less? Does less enable any functions, Oxygen functions that are not available in CSS? Alex, do you want to answer to this question? Or?
Well, yes, I want. So the thing is that at some point, CSS will become quite hard to maintain. You will copy paste blocks of declaration of properties between different rule sets. So at some point you want to have some mechanisms for reuse, for example, those mixins that I've presented. So when you update your CSS, you can just change in one place and everything updates automatically. Less comes with other useful features like defining variables. So it makes you more proficient and organized when writing CSS. So you should find out more about it.
Okay, another question was about the PDF transformation in WebAuthor. So if these transformations are available also for the WebAuthor, right now we don't have this support. We have some issues to make these transformations available also there, and I think we'll increase its priority. Another question was about the configuration, the ccconfig XML file. I don't know if...
Right, I can take this one. So it says, obviously someone that has already has a lot of experience with customizing Oxygen because it knows about how you can configure the content completion through a configuration file. This configuration file is named ccconfig, and the question is, from this ccconfig.xml file, how can I not propose some elements without specifying every element and allowed children? Is there a never propose this element option? Well, I think we have something. That's why I've created such a configuration file. So on the element proposals, so on an element proposals, you can reject specific elements. Like, for example, I don't want, well, actually there's a sample here. It says that inside a paragraph, inside a para element, you should reject bold and italic. So I think this kind of answers the questions, and maybe I think we can also, oops. Well, if we don't put the path element, then I believe that these elements, the bold and italic, will be rejected from everywhere inside the document.
Okay, so let's go to the next question. So it says, okay, great presentation. Do you know that? Do you know what will not work in the web author framework? So if you use this framework or a custom framework in web author, you need to do something different, or there are actions that will not work.
Well, what comes to mind right away is the part that is specific to each distribution. So for example, if I have an author action that presents a dialog, so for example, an action to insert a table, that this can present a dialog in which the user can select the title and so on. This action should have different implementation. For the desktop version of Oxygen, the action is based on Java Swing. For the Eclipse, it must be an implementation that uses SVT. On the web author, it's something that must be done on the client side. So these parts have to be implemented differently for depending to the distribution. But the greater part of a framework will work on any Oxygen distribution. So like the CSS styling, the majority of the author actions, the validation, quick fixes for schematron. So
Content completion, yes.
Content completion, yes. All those will work out of the box.
Okay, another question was if the library, the less library will be available somehow to play with it.
Well, all the samples from this webinar will be made available together with the webinar recording. And that's actually an idea that came to our mind as well. For this webinar, I tried to extract a few such rules from our DITA CSS, but I can see such a library grow and become something that can be very easily applied to many XML vocabulary. So we will continue this idea. We will try to grow it as well.
Okay, another question was about this portability that I think Alex already responded to it, that if all the frameworks are 100% usable on desktop, Eclipse, and web version, if there are any limitations between this implementation. So Alex already responded to the question. Another question was also about the files that you presented, the sample files that you presented, if it will be available. And yes, it will be available on our events page, also with the recording. There is another questions about the PDF A3 support. I don't know about this too much.
Me neither. We will investigate and return with an answer.
Yeah, and very good presentation. Thank you, Alex. Okay, I think it's enough with the
Yes, and in case we've skipped any of your questions, we will answer them in a follow-up email. So don't worry about it.
Okay, so before I end the presentation, let me tell you a few things about the upcoming events. You can find them on our events page. So next week we will be in Stuttgart in Germany. We'll have a stand there, and in case you are in Germany or near Stuttgart, you can visit us. There will be also some presentation, I think 8 presentations with tools and different different aspects from Oxygen and WebAuthor. Also, in November 28th, there will be a webinar about creating schematron rules and schematron quick fixes. It will be a starting point for those who want to create their own schematron rules. Next will be a webinar about creating a DITA project and how you can set up a DITA project, presented by Stephen Higgs. And in December 12th, there will be an interesting webinar with tips and tricks in Oxygen productivity. This will be presented by our colleague Radu Koravu. So I think some of them already told us that we'll be in Stuttgart, so we'll meet you there. I think we'll hear you at the next webinar or in Stuttgart if you'll come. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Alex, for the great presentation.
Thank you, Octavian, and thank you all for attending. And see you at our next webinars. We intend to keep them going.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.